Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of July. If you saw my August TBR video, which is my latest video, you would have heard me talking about how July went, and you would already know that it was a bust, but you might not realize it was this bad. This is what my reading stats looked like in July. I only read 7 books and my average rating was a 2.92. Yeah, not a good month. I almost even combined my wrap up with my next month's TBR just to make the video more fun to do, because this just might not be the most fun wrap up, but we're gonna get it all out there so it can be a moment of catharsis and I can move past this month and pretend this month of reading mostly did not happen. I read a lot digitally this month, so I have to reference my list on my spreadsheet. Starting last month, I decided I didn't really want to talk about DNFs anymore, but there's some books that I DNF this month that I read a substantial amount of, so I'm just gonna very quickly breeze over those. Also, because my reading is so slim this month, it gives me a little bit more to talk about and to tell you what went on in the month. So I tried picking up Here One Moment by Leanne Moriarty. I actually had a physical copy of that, but I think I did that right before the move and then I just went ahead and unhauled it so I didn't have to move it with me. I read over 50% of this book, but it is a very long one. The concept is that all these people are on a plane and this woman just starts walking around making these predictions for when and how all these random people are going to die, and then those things start to manifest and you're just following these different people's stories after this weird event. I love concepts like that, but this one didn't feel like it had very strong legs to stand on. It didn't keep my attention. I even was listening to the audiobook too, and I just didn't feel like finishing it. So I did look up spoilers to see how everything ends. I feel like it was a good call on my part to DNF it. I don't think it would have gotten any better for me. This was one of those books that I had picked up from Book of the Month previously, just using up credits before I canceled my Book of the Month subscription. So I'm glad that I just got it off my TBR. A Game in Yellow by Haley Piper. I had an arc of this one from the publisher. I read like 70% of this and then tapped out. This book sounded so good. It really sounded very similar to The Book of Most Precious Substance by Sarah Gran, which I really enjoyed. It's about this queer couple and they're really into kink exploration, but also their relationship is a little bit stale and one of the women is having trouble like just finding things to make her get going, you know? And then her partner introduces her to this other woman who has this book, and it's like you can read a little bit of it and that'll like get you going, but if you read too much you get like lost in it. And this is apparently a concept. There's a play called A King in Yellow, or the concept of some things about this. I ended up looking into it a little bit, so that's what it's all based off of. Sounded very intriguing. I really did not like the story. This is my first thing I think I've ever read from Haley Piper. I don't even think I've read a short story from them, although maybe I have in the past just from a collection, an anthology or something, but I wasn't super familiar with this author. And I just did not like the story. I didn't like the characters. I wasn't rooting for anyone. There's a lot that gets abstract and kind of cosmic, and that was just losing me in the story. So I got really far, but I didn't completely finish it. And then the other book I DNF'd was The Other Side of Now by Paige Harbison, which the publisher sent to me. I was super excited about. It's this story about this woman who ends up going on this vacation and she ends up in this like alternate reality version of her life where there are some things that are different, makes her reflect on her life and the choices that she's made, etc., etc. She is famous, she's an actress, and this book just turned me off so quickly. I did not like the writing style. I did not like the way this character was being depicted. I don't often read books with famous people, and this one in particular just read really out of touch and obnoxious to me. And then there was a line of just something she was thinking. She was like at a party or something, she's just thinking some things in her head, and she starts thinking about unhoused people, and she even says unhoused people, so you're like, okay, there's like a political correctness, like up to date the way you're referring to these people, but it says something to the effect of like, I get so sad when I look at unhoused people, especially when you can tell that they used to be hot, or something like that. And I don't know, that was just kind of like the final straw for me, because I was already just not vibing with it. So that was a bummer, because I thought the concept sounded great, but there's a ton of other books like this out there, so I'll just have to find another one if I'm looking for that speculative stuff that I like. Now going into books I completed, there's one book that I read this month that I found myself unable to put a rating on, and I think that might be because I was just having such a bad month already, and I thought I was liking this book, but then I wasn't anymore, and I don't think I wanted to accept that it was going to be another lowly rated book, and I just missed the potential that it had in the beginning. I'm talking about It's Not the End of the World by Jonathan Parks Ramage. I had this on audiobook, and I thought I'd never read from this author before, but I've heard this book pitched a couple times. It sounded really interesting to me. I had the audiobook available through the Libra FM ALC program, so I was like, great, I'll give it a try. It turns out I have read from this author before. I've read the book Yes Daddy. I think it's still on my shelves somewhere, many years ago, and I could not remember how I felt about it. I remember it being like a sensual, sexually explicit type of book, and it was about this uneven power dynamic relationship situation thing that happens, but I can't remember very much about it. Then I went and looked on Goodreads. Apparently I gave it a 4 stars, so I guess I liked it. And this book has an interesting concept, and it starts on a very good note. It kicks off and you're following this queer couple who is living in California, and they are having their baby shower. They have a surrogate who's helping them have a baby, and it's the day of their big baby shower. But this is also a dystopia, climate fiction, climate disaster type of story as well. And it's the end of the world. And the book also has this countdown element. So it starts and it's like 8 hours, 30 minutes before. So I was so intrigued. I'm like, great, we're going to this baby shower. We've got these things to plan. They're going off in different directions because one of them has to go get the cake and something else is happening. You're getting the background of their relationship and their surrogate and how their dynamic is all together. You're starting to learn things about the world and how they have this like service that can come out for rich people and create like fake rain for your property so that it makes your air more breathable, and they're a rich couple, so they're able to do that. And you're seeing like, okay, climate disaster, class differences, like a lot of interesting things are being laid out in the story. The countdown element, very enticing. What's gonna happen when the clock ticks down and we get to the end of the world? I thought that was gonna be the whole book. I was expecting that the countdown was going to last a very long time. But then we started getting really close to 0, way faster than I expected. And I was like, okay, interesting, what's gonna happen? Book takes a little bit of a turn, kind of becomes this other thing. There's like a different element introduced. And I was like, whoa, didn't see that coming, but I am intrigued. And then the book takes another turn, and it kind of felt like 3 different stories all in one. By the end, I just didn't know that that's the kind of book it was going to be. It felt very chaotic and all over the place. I really liked the beginning. I was like, okay, I'll see where this goes. When it made its first turn, when it made another turn, again, I was like, okay, I'll see where this goes. But cohesively, it just didn't come together for me. It's extremely satirical. It's extremely over the top. It has these things that make it a potential thing that I would enjoy, but altogether it just didn't really work for me. So that's why I was like, I don't know. I don't even have a rating to put on it because it's cool in concept. I do think maybe it tried to do too many things all in one book. I don't know, it just didn't really work for me. Another book that was cool in concept but did not really work for me was The Turnglass by Gareth Rubin. I ended up making a dedicated video to my experience reading this book. This is a Tate Besh story, so there are 2 stories in one. You can read the story this way, or you can start this way and read this half of the story first, or you can go back and read one chapter at a time until you get to where they meet in the middle. If you want to see my experience with this book, how I decided to read it, how that process went for me, you can check out that video. I'll have it linked down below. What originally attracted me to the book was the concept. I thought that sounded really interesting. This is a mystery story. It's set in 2 different timelines in 2 different places. The first timeline is set in 1881 in Essex, England, and then the second timeline is set in 1939 in Los Angeles, California. The concept was cool, and I like how it tried to do something. Like, I like how the stories were connected and what's revealed and the idea of that. And if I just sit and talk through the plot beats, it sounds like an interesting thing, but I didn't like the writing style of this, or really anything with the execution of it. I didn't like the characters that we chose to follow as the main characters. I think we should have followed other characters. That would have made for a better story. And oftentimes it had a very slow, dull, boring pace to it. So it was a bummer because I would have loved to have loved this, but did not end up getting the best rating for me. I was kind of going back and forth between giving a 2 or a 1-star rating. I don't remember exactly where I landed in the moment when I was making the video. I might have said a 1-star then. In my spreadsheet, I ended up tracking it as a 2. So it's somewhere between a 1 and a 2 for me. I had some really strange experiences with books this month where I would start them thinking they were one thing and they just became something else. The next book I have to talk about did that same thing. That is Adrift by Lisa Brdeaux. I ended up reading this for Summerween, which I participated in at the beginning of the month. I didn't do a vlog this year, but I did do daily little videos in YouTube Shorts format, so you can check those out if you missed those. The concept of this book is very simple. You're following this woman who wakes up on a boat in the middle of the water with no memory of who she is at all. But she finds a note that says, "Start over, don't make yourself known, don't look back." And the story follows her after that point as she decides how to move forward in life with such a weird, vague, ominous note and absolutely no memory of who she is or where she came from or what she's supposed to be doing. What I wasn't expecting was for this book to also be a cli-fi book. It's also a climate fiction. I don't remember if it ends up saying the year that it's set, but it feels, a little bit futuristic, a little bit dystopian, where there's even more climate disasters happening around the world. And I love climate fiction. I love books that explore that. So that was a pleasant surprise. As the book continued, I guess my critique of it is that I was going into expecting more of a thriller, and it ended up feeling more like a literary fiction story that had this interesting kicking off point. When a book begins like that, with just a woman waking up, no memory of who she is, it can really go anywhere, I guess. And so it's hard to say that it didn't meet my expectations of where I thought it would go, but in a way it kind of didn't. It spent more time with certain characters and certain situations than I thought it would. It wasn't necessarily the type of story that I thought it would be. So there were things I liked about it, there were things I didn't love about it, and I ended up giving it a rating right in the middle at a 2.5 star rating. Things get better from this point forward because we've reached my 3 stars. The first one is Night Watcher by Daphne Wollstonecraft. I listened to this audiobook from Libro.fm's ALC program as part of Summerween as well. The concept of the story actually sort of reminds me of one of my favorite thrillers of the year so far, which was The Man Made of Smoke by Alex North. However, I did like this quite a bit more. So if you enjoyed Night Watcher and you're looking for more like it, I'd recommend giving this book a try. Night Watcher is about this woman who is a podcaster, and she had an encounter with a serial killer when she was younger, and that serial killer was never caught, and that has haunted her ever since then. Now, skip forward many years in the future, she's running this podcast. Actually, her dad used to run the show, and now she's taken it over and she's running it, and she thinks that the serial killer has returned, is in her town, and is after her again. Great concept, very reminiscent of The Man Made of Smoke, which is also following a guy who has an encounter with a serial killer in his youth, and now his dad's gone missing, and he thinks it might have something to do with the serial killer again. I really like that setup. It's very creepy. This book did a really good job of communicating that eerie feeling of someone watching you, and a lot of the time I spent listening to this, I was alone in the dark, on a drive, in my car. It was creepy. If you like for books to elicit that feeling in you, you're looking for something that'll actually freak you out, maybe scare you a little bit, I'd recommend giving this one a try on audio when you're alone in the dark, cleaning your house, whatever. It will give you that creepy crawly feeling. My critiques of this book and why I ended up giving it a 3 star and not a higher rating is I did not find the book to be particularly memorable. I did not find the main character to be particularly memorable, and I did not like the ending and how everything wrapped up. I think the explanation for things, the villain, it all was a little bit weak for me. I didn't feel like there was a very strong motive. Has a lot of build up, and then it fell a little bit flat for me in the end, but I found it to be a really good, easy listen. So if it sounds interesting to you, I'd recommend picking it up and giving it a try. My next 3 star book is We Don't Talk About Carol by Kristen L. Berry. I had an arc of this from the publisher. I ended up listening to it as an audiobook. I can't remember if it was part of Libro.fm's program or if I just ended up purchasing the audiobook through Libro.fm myself. I think that's what I ended up doing. This is a mystery story that is also largely a family drama, family mystery. You're following this woman named Sydney who used to be a journalist back in the day, but she ended up stepping away from her job after she had some mental health problems come up in the past. In present day, her grandmother has just died, and after that it kind of brings up this whole situation of her missing Aunt Carol. When she was younger, she found a picture of this woman who looked remarkably similar to her. She asked her grandmother about it, and her grandmother said, "We don't talk about Carol," and just kind of pushed the issue away. Now that her grandmother has passed, she's coming across this again. It spurs her to start looking into it and figure out what happened to her Aunt Carol. Generally, this is a pretty standard setup for a mystery, a missing person, someone trying to figure out what happened to them. This story in particular largely focuses on the inequities in our justice system when it comes to missing Black women and children, as Sydney and her family and her Aunt Carol are all Black women. So I appreciated that angle to the story and it diving into that important issue. This book goes through a lot of different issues. There's so many themes and things packed into this, and all of it really comes back to family at the end of the day. There is a lot of talk about IVF and infertility, and I know that's uncomfortable for some people to read, so I want to put that warning out there too if that's not something you're interested interested in reading. That does take up a significant portion of Sydney, the main character's mental headspace. Is that something that she is going through with her husband? She also has some tenuous relationships between her sister and her mother that she's exploring throughout the book, as well as her abusive father and reliving some of the trauma that she's gone through in the past. There's a lot of exploration around generational trauma as well and how that passes down through the family. So a lot gets packed into this story, and that was perhaps my criticism of it, why it ended up being a 3-star. There's a lot of good ideas here, but I think all of that coming into the story did slow down the pacing of the mystery aspect of the story, and I was going in ready for the mystery. I do think it still succeeds as a mystery. I liked the ending and how everything played out. It does have a little bit of a nuanced ending that you can explore at the end as well. And I believe this is this author's debut, and she got a 2-book deal, so she'll have another book coming out. So she's someone who will be on my radar in the future. Next up is The Ex-Girlfriend Murder Club by Gloria Chow. I ended up listening to this as an audiobook on Spotify actually, but I also did have an arc of it from the publisher as an ebook that I could follow along with as well. This has such a fun concept. If you're a fan of John Tucker Must Die, I feel like you have to pick this book up because it is definitely largely inspired by that story. If you're familiar with John Tucker Must Die, which was one of my favorite movies growing up, I've seen that movie so many times. That tells the story of this guy who's really hot and so charming, like the perfect guy, but he's also a serial cheater, and these 3 different girls find out that he has been dating all of them, and so they bond together to get revenge against John Tucker. In this story, you have a similar setup where there's super attractive, wonderful, perfect guy, but it turns out he's sleeping with all these different women, and they find out, so they decide they want to bond together to get revenge on him. But then it turns out that he is dead, and they find him dead, and then they all look like suspects, and they have to work together to try to figure out who did it so they can clear their own names. Very fun concept. This one was a super fun listen. These are the types of mystery thrillers I've been finding myself more interested in this year. Like one of my other favorites of the year, The Retirement Plan. It sort of reminded me of that because this also is just like a fun romp that is silly and over the top, and you're just following these normal people getting themselves into shenanigans in ridiculous situations and seeing how they can get out of it. Also, what I did like about this is the start of a series called the Who Done It series, and the main character's last name is Who, which I just think is really clever. The main character is also really interested in things like etymology and where phrases derive from, so there's a lot of that infused through the story as well, like when you just say a random expression. I can't think of any examples from the book right now, but like, you know, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and then she will have a little, I don't know if it's a footnote because it was the audiobook, so I wasn't looking to see if they designed that as a footnote or if it just goes off, but a little footnote thought of like, oh, this is where that came from, which might be annoying to some people, but I always think stuff like that's kind of fun. She's just a pretty quirky character. She also has like the laws of good luck that she refers back to many times throughout the story, which is just her own internal system of like, this is the law of having good luck, and you know, it's just a little funny little quirky thing about her. Some of my critiques of the story, why it's a 3-star, there's a podcast element throughout the story that I just didn't love being in the story. I feel like this happens a lot in mysteries where a podcast will just get thrown in, chunked in throughout the story, and you're like, did we need the podcast? Felt like we didn't need the podcast. I also would have liked to feel like I knew the tertiary characters a little bit more. Like the main character, I feel like you get to know pretty well, but then the 2 other women, I felt like they could have developed more as well-rounded people for me to really feel like I knew them, to feel a little bit more distinct, especially if this is going to be a series. I will say at this point, I don't really feel like I would read another book in the series. It didn't really feel like it left something that would make me want to come back and read another one. I think this was a fun time for what it was. It was a good, easy listen. I think there's just a lot of mystery series coming out all the time, and so it really takes a lot for me to want to stay invested in them because there's so many out there. It becomes a lot to try to start to keep up with all of these, so it's really like the standout ones that I end up going back to for more books in the following series. But all in all, I thought it was a good time. I liked the twist and the surprise that came at the ending and how that tied everything together. And I think if you like John Tucker Must Die, it's just like a guaranteed good time. Finally, I have Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. This was the last book I read in the month, and this was the best book that I read in the month. And I really thought that this would be a 5-star for me because I feel like I've heard pretty exclusively 5-star ratings for this book. People absolutely love it. And maybe that raised my expectations a bit too high because I was going into this expecting it to be perfect and thought-provoking and deep and emotional and just all of these things because of how highly I've heard this book talked about. And I do think it was good. It was really good for, you know, what it was doing. This is, I think, probably my first standalone fantasy that I've read that is exploring a big topic of discovering a systemic problem in your world and trying to conquer that. I've read standalone fantasy in other types of stories that are a bit more character focused and contained, but this is the first one I think that I've read that has a concept that feels like it's going to be a series, but it all gets packed into one book. And so I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Once I started realizing what was going on in the story, I was like, how are we going to wrap all this up in one book? This feels like something that could be, you know, a trilogy to really get into the world building of it all. When it comes to fantasy, I still don't know much about it. I'm a fantasy newbie, so what do I know about this? I don't know. But to me, something just felt a little bit off in the middle of the book in terms of the pacing. I love the beginning, I love the end. The middle was a little bit of a drag for me. Drag is maybe a harsh term. I still liked it. It did just lose my engagement a little bit, especially compared to how gripping I found the beginning and the end to be. This story follows a woman named Sayana. I don't know how people say her name, but in my head, I was saying Sayana. And she has been training to become a high mage. So in this world, they have this magic system. They have these things called spellographs, which basically look like a typewriter. And they're writing spells and they're putting them in that machine, and then they're siphoning this magic to make stuff happen. And she has been training to be a high mage, which is like the best of the best at this university. There's never been a woman that has been a high mage. It has always been men. And it turns out, not a spoiler, it's in the synopsis, she ends up getting admitted. She becomes the first woman high mage. But she is not received well by her colleagues. Unsurprisingly, they give her a very hard time, and everyone ends up getting assistance when you're a high mage, and they end up pairing her with this guy who's actually a janitor. She does not want them to know that they are getting under her skin, so she accepts the janitor as her assistant. And then the course of the book, what ends up unfolding is her and the janitor are working together, and they end up discovering something very dark about their society, and then they decide what to do about that. There were so many things that I found to be so excellent about this book. This is like one of the best first chapters of a book ever. Was it a first chapter or was it a prologue? I don't know, but the beginning portion of the book, so good. So gripping, incredible writing, immediately pulls you into this world, immediately shows you how high the stakes are in this world. It was so successful at really getting your attention pulled into the book. I think the character work was great. I really enjoyed Sayana's character and the janitor that she works with and the way they bring these ideas out of each other. Love the themes. Love the exploration of so many things, and I don't want to spoil the main, you know, meat of the book, but one of the big themes is like around exploitation and a lot of good stuff that is so timely for so many things that we are experiencing in our world today. I do think the ending was great too. I was getting nervous, like I said, with the pacing of like, oh, I don't know, how are we going to explore this? How are we going to go through such a big character arc so quickly? But I think the story ended in the perfect way to make it work all in one book. Not an ending you'd probably expect, but very successful for what it needed to do, and then everything came full circle in such a beautiful way. But like I said before, that middle part just was not as top tier for me as I was maybe expecting. So I'm giving this a 4-star, which is still a great rating. I still thought it was a great book. I definitely also want to read The Sword of Kaigen, another standalone fantasy book from M.L. Wong. And in general, I am just interested in exploring more standalone fantasy books. As I begin reading more fantasy, it is just nice to find these standalone stories so you don't have to get invested in these huge series that feel like they're taking up a huge amount of your time. I still like to read other genres as well, so it's nice to find just quick standalone things I can pick up instead of feeling like I'm really turning to like, oh, I can read in the month of fantasy because I want to get through 8 books in a series all in one month. So if you have other standalone fantasy recommendations, definitely let me know down below. That is it for all the books I read in the month of July. I am so happy to just package that up, ship it away, act like it didn't happen, except for, you know, some of the good stuff. I did have some books that were okay, but largely, generally just not a great reading month. I hope your reading month went better, and I hope my next month goes better as well. I'm feeling more hopeful about my August plans. If you missed my August reading plans, that is my most recent video. You can check it out, my August TBR. Yeah, that puts a wrap on the wrap up. So let me know down below if you've read any of these books I talked about and what you think about them as well. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.